Okay, I think we're going to get started. It's already 6:30. Can you guys hear me pretty well? Okay, cool. All right. So first, thank you guys for coming tonight. I want to introduce myself and Fabric and everything for some of you who are new that haven't been here before. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. Welcome to Fabric, welcome to Eco Fashion Week, and welcome to Behind the Seams, which is a monthly event that we do every single month. And this networking that you guys are doing is really the big goal here. This is what we want. We want people to meet each other, to connect, and learn from each other. So first I'm going to introduce why we're doing this and what Fabric is. Fabric actually stands for the Fashion and Business Resource Innovation Center. So that's an acronym. Basically, we are a fashion incubator, and we're a design studio, we're a business accelerator, we're a factory. We do all kinds of different things, and it's basically a nonprofit where somebody who is starting a clothing brand can actually come and get all of the services that they need under one roof, so they don't have to go all over the place trying to find pattern makers, fabrics, grading, marking, cutting, sewing, all the stuff that you would normally have to a la carte out in a place like LA or Los Angeles is found under one roof here. And not only that, it's got guidance, because if you've never started a clothing brand before, you probably wouldn't even know where to go. You probably wouldn't even know what to ask for. I see heads shaking who are people who have worked with us, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know how I would have ever done this, because it's really challenging out there if you've never done this before. There is not a lot of resources left in the US, and so most people are faced with manufacturing overseas. And imagine all the barriers that go along with that. There's language barriers, there's time delays, there's the fact that there's not a lot of transparency in how your clothing is being made overseas. You have to overproduce in giant quantities overseas, and you end up with all this excess inventory, because when you first start out, can you even sell all of that stuff? So there's a lot of obstacles in your way when you're an apparel entrepreneur, and we're here to remove many of those obstacles. The guidance is our biggest gift to an apparel entrepreneur, is hand-holding you through that entire process. This is some of the technology that allows us to do all of that more efficiently. So we do everything in the Gerber Electra software and other software that allows us to be able to even stitch up your samples on 3D avatars, so you kind of see what it's going to look like before you ever cut and sew the garment. That saves you a lot of time and money and waste. We can also engineer really cool prints and make it more creative, more artistic, and more special, and see where those prints are going to land on the garment before it's sewn up. You can experiment with colors, prints. You can actually take your avatar and use it for marketing. So if you want to put it on your website and get orders, and then we can print, cut, and sew those orders on demand, thanks to all the technology that we have, including the Kornit Presto, which is a piece of equipment that is amazing. It's downstairs. If anybody wants to see after this, I'll take you downstairs. You can see our factory. All this is done downstairs in our on-demand factory, and that Presto allows us to customize and print as those orders come in. So imagine, as a brand, instead of making a whole bunch of like one color of something and hoping to sell it, you use your avatar. You put your avatar out there on your website. As the orders come in, you can print just this size in this color, and this size in this print, and this size and this one, and just fill those orders. You don't sit on any inventory. That printer allows us to print on almost any fiber too. So instead of sublimation printing on polyester, which we're going to learn tonight is really not a great thing, you can print on sustainable fabrics like bamboo or hemp or cactus leather. That jacket you saw in there with the flowers was printed on cactus leather. So that enables your brand to be more sustainable, because you're not overproducing and ending up with excess inventory, but you're using sustainable fibers at the same time. So small brands come here because they're usually filling a void in the marketplace. It's not like we need more clothing in the world, but not everybody is able to buy what's out there, because those big brands, they have to produce kind of generic sizing in order to fit most people. So what about the outliers? What about the people who have different body shapes and things like that? Or what about unique products that maybe the big brands aren't focusing on? that's what an apparel entrepreneur who comes here is really doing, is they're filling a void in the marketplace and making it in just what is needed. And that's why this place is so special. We're a nonprofit, like I mentioned. So we have a people-focused mission. We're really here to help people, apparel entrepreneurs, so that they can get in the industry and they can get their product ideas out there. But we have a planet-focused vision, because in helping people start these more sustainable brands, we're really taking, taking the industry to the next level. So trying to move away from that disposable fashion model into more of this, smaller batch, what's needed kind of model. And we're going to learn about this tonight. We have really special guests that are going to help us understand this even more. But that's what we are. We're a nonprofit that's focused on people and planet. And the only way that we're able to exist is thanks to the city of Tempe, because they have partnered with us and allowed us to have this beautiful space in which to offer all of this. And again, if you want to join me afterwards, I can take you downstairs and I can show you the sewing factory. But we partner with the city of Tempe. We give free and discounted programs and services to the apparel entrepreneurs to make it more affordable for them, so they don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just learning the ropes, going back to school, hiring production managers and quality control managers. They can get scholarshiped into our educational platform. And we document and report all of the free and discounted programs and services to the city of Tempe, and that's kind of our swap. That's how we are able to stay in this beautiful building. So we kind of earn our stay here. Over the 8 years that we've been here, I guess it's 8 years, 7? Okay, 2016 is when we started, but it's 2024. It's like almost 8 years. Getting close. Almost, yeah. So it's 7 years. We have contributed about almost $13 million worth of free and discounted programs and services. So a lot of apparel entrepreneurs have come through it. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for putting your brand in our hands. We really appreciate that, for trusting this. So 1,650 apparel entrepreneurs have been able to use these resources, and many of you are in this room right now. So we're really proud about being able to do that. And the biggest way that we offer that is through these scholarships into our educational platform. But you don't have to be an apparel entrepreneur and actually, work through, development and manufacturing. You can just be a passionate community member, a student, somebody who loves fashion, and get all kinds of other free resources as well. So I want to tell you, if you are a free member, some of the things that you can get. We have so many great resources that can connect you to the industry. We have a free directory on our website. So if you're looking to support local or support small brands, because this is beyond local now, we have brands coming here from all over the country, actually all over the world. So if you want to find who they are so you can support them, click on our directory on our website. Everything I'm about to mention is under the community tab on our website. So if you go to Fabric Incubator, you click on community, you're going to see all these things, and one of those is our industry directory. And there's people in this room who are actually listed in that directory right now, so you can find their brands and you can buy from them and support them. It's not just brands though, there's hair, makeup, models, photographers, manufacturers, all kinds of people listed in there. It's a way for the industry to find each other and hire each other. We also have a classifieds page. So if your brand is growing and you need to hire people, instead of having to pay for a job board somewhere, send it to us. We'll post it on our classifieds page for you for free. And if you're a student or somebody who's looking to get experience in the industry before you start your brand, go there. You guys are students. Go there under classifieds, and you can find all the fashion jobs that we know of. So we're constantly adding fashion jobs there. We also have an events calendar under the community tab. The events calendar lists all of the industry events you should know about. So there's some big industry events that happen worldwide that are important for apparel entrepreneurs to know about, like trade shows like Magic and textile shows like the LA Textile Show and things like that. One place to find all of those, but also all of our events that are there too. And we believe in giving you opportunities that are a lot more affordable, because you're going to run out of money participating in fashion shows and attending trade shows and things like that when you're a small brand, and you need that money for manufacturing your clothes. So when you participate in our fashion shows, They're either free or they're under $100. We try to make everything as affordable as possible. We have an annual event every year that includes 60 local designers, and that is called the Label Horde Fashion Show. Each designer puts in one signature look. It's $40 to participate, and it takes place over there on Mill, right next to us, during the middle of the Tempe Festival of the Arts, which attracts about 200,000 people every year. So that's a great way to get a lot of exposure for $40. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. One of the things that we do every year is Eco Fashion Week, and that's what we're doing right now. We're a part of Eco Fashion Week. And at Eco Fashion Week, we have all kinds of fashion shows. So if you haven't attended, and actually we have a couple new people here who attended the launch of Eco Fashion Week, which is the Refabricate Fashion Show. Every year, you can participate if you are a sewer, or you are a brand or a student that likes to sew, or a community member. It's an upcycled denim project, and basically Goodwill donated denim, and everybody turned them into new pieces that were on the runway at Tempe Marketplace last Saturday, and it was an amazing turnout and such a, oh my gosh, the talent was incredible. All the pieces on the runway were really cool. So that's our launch, and then throughout the week we've had all kinds of really cool events, and then the ending of the week is Saturday, this coming Saturday, which is the Canvas Fashion Show, and that's where we're going to showcase all the technology I was talking about. So all of you guys come back and join us for the Canvas Fashion Show, because you're going to see what that technology looks like strung together from end to end. Everything from the avatars all the way into the digital product passports, where you can actually tap your phone onto the item of clothing and pull up a full list of how that product was made, and everything about that product and the brand and everything is right there on your phone. So that is going to open up a whole world of possibilities for fashion and for transparency and all the things that are coming down the pipeline that we're going to learn about today, so that the world can be a better place. We can all know how our clothing was made, and we're doing that right here at Fabric. And this is one of the only places in the country you can come where you can access that end-to-end technology like that as a small brand. Even the big brands don't even have all of that strung together yet. So this is a really special place. And when you are an apparel entrepreneur and you get that guidance, you get guidance into starting a business, branding it, marketing it, getting through development of your samples, getting through small batch manufacturing so you can test the market, and it guides you and tells you what to do at every step along the way. And so that is our biggest thing that I think that we offer. So if you haven't gone to design school and majored in production management yet, and you don't want to, this is where you can come and do that. Or if you have gone to design school and majored in fashion design, these are the things they don't teach you when you're there learning how to make clothing and sew it and drape and things like that. They don't literally teach you how to fill out a cutting ticket or a grading and marking ticket or QC the pattern before it gets graded or things like that. The stuff that you have to know if you're an apparel entrepreneur. So that's what we guide you through. Okay, enough about Fabric. I just always want to make sure everybody knows why you're here and who we are and what we're doing. But one of those things are that we do every month that is a give back is this educational event that's called Behind the Seams. And every month there's a different subject and a different speaker. And the point of this is so that you all could meet each other and network with each other, and so that we can all learn something. So we bring in a different expert, they tell their journey, so you can kind of hear what it took to become who they are, and then they teach us something about what it is they're an expert in. Before we do that, though, I want to see, is anybody in this room an apparel entrepreneur member? You have an entrepreneur membership. Put your hand up. I know that you are too. Have you signed up for the apparel entrepreneur membership? No, this is the one where you're manufacturing with us. So put your hand up really high. Okay, yes, okay. The three of you guys, as a benefit to being an apparel, and Amanda, aren't you an apparel entrepreneur? I thought you were, but I might be wrong. Okay. One of the benefits is you get to stand up and quickly introduce what you do to the audience. So are any of you brave enough to go first? Yes? Okay, good. I'm going to give you this because then the people online.
I'm going to go to the front. I don't like my back turned. So I'm Nylasia. I'm CEO and founder of BuildABra.co, creating customizable bras for a curvaceous woman. So I have interchangeable bra strap and the back band, offering narrow and wide straps, and then also narrow and wide back band. And then hopefully in the future, I want to offer different size cups as well. Thank you.
Tell her the name of the brand slowly.
Oh, okay. I said buildabra.co, LLC. Build a bra. Thank you.
Hiroko, do you want to go next? I know she's like, no. Do you want me to help you? You are so good. You think you're not good, but you're so good. You feel comfortable? You okay? Okay.
Okay. Do I have to stand up? Yeah. Okay, okay. Okay. Sorry, okay. So my name is Hiroko Whitlow, and my company's name is Roko Captivation, and I'm still work in progress. Almost ready. I just had a photo shooting last week, but anyhow, my brand is it's ready to wear, and also more traveling people who when people travel to overseas or somewhere vacation, they don't have to worry about the wrinkle, and then also the washable and then dryable, and then so easy to care. So it took for a long time to pick the right fabric, and almost like a half a year to pick the right fabric because I needed tested washing and dryer. Even companies say this fabric is only for gentle wash and then no dryer. You have to flat. But I knew that most people don't look the care level, so I have to be like that kind of people. So I needed tested, just put in a washing machine regular wash, and then also dryer the regular heat, and then most clothes shrunk a lot. So I had to say, okay, this is no, 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 no. So that's why the reason it took for a long time. The reason why I'm spending the time for this because I know the many fashion company out there, like for example, Forever 21. That's really cheap and a reasonable price. But the one time when I bought it and I wear one time and I wash it and it just destroyed. So for me, the sustainable is I know the quality is good, and then also people wear for a long time. It lasts for a long time. So I don't want to make lots of garbage. So that's the reason the design I did, the design I did is something simple, and I don't really follow the kind of style. So people never get tired, and also wearable any occasions, and then my clothes is kind of almost like a one size, so easy to adjust it, and then also, I don't know, I'm talking too much, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. You did such a good job. You were so worried you wouldn't be able to communicate. But we all got that. So that is exactly what we're talking about tonight. Brands that are making something that isn't disposable. And you're doing such a good job going through the whole entire process. And it's hard, right? It's hard, but you're doing it. You're rocking it. Okay, now Ellen.
Hello, my name is Ellen, and my brand is called Lupine Outerwear, and I actually hail from New England, and I live in tick country. So I am making insect-repelling outerwear, so I'm using fabrics that have permethrin infused into the fabric so they don't wash out, they're not toxic. And basically, I'm making a women's workwear line because women do work outside, and we have no clothes to wear. And I had to work outside for a couple years during COVID, and I, was basically wearing like sailing gear to stay warm and dry and not be full of ticks. And my clothes, the lines have like a couple unique features like internal gaiters so ticks can't crawl up through the legs. So there's like nowhere to go but down, like some hidden features inside the pant legs and just sort of unique things like that. And yeah, so women's workwear, that's what I'm trying to make.
So you can see, I mean, that's just a sampling of all the amazing things that come out of here. And it's important that we support brands like this so that, you know, our industry can become more sustainable and making just what is needed and just, you know, filling those voids in the marketplace. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, we are now getting ready to start behind the scenes, and I am so excited about this one, you guys, because I have been following our guest for quite a while now and have been listening to her podcast thanks to our creative director, Amelia, who turned me on to our guest tonight. And I think I'm on my 100th episode or maybe 99th episode or something like that. So every time I drive to work and back, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm learning so much because it is all about sustainable fashion. And I thought I knew a lot about sustainable fashion. I don't know nearly enough, and now I do, thanks to Amanda McCarty from Clothes Horse Podcast. Let's invite her back up here. Hey, I'm such a fangirl now because I've been listening to you for so long, and I'm just like giddy. Where do you feel comfortable sitting? Oh, it's not on. Sorry. Okay.
I have a sprained ankle. That's why I'm walking like this. If you all want to just take a look at my bandage now, we'll just get over
beautiful.
it. Yeah.
Do you want to sit here,
Yeah.
here?
I might be like up and down just because, like, you know, I sprained my ankle doing laundry. It wasn't even exciting.
It's always that way. It's never like the
totally.
adventurous story, you
No,
know?
Yeah.
So welcome to Fabric. I'm so excited that you're actually here. And you flew in from where?
From Pennsylvania. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here. It's my first time in Tempe and really in Arizona, but not in the airport or at the Grand Canyon. And it's been awesome to meet so many people who are just really excited about making change, because I'm getting kind of emotional. But this stuff makes me emotional because change is going to happen if all of us get involved, you know? And we have to. It seems unfair. Shouldn't we just be able to kick back? Like, I would love to just be like picking up some hobbies or something, or I don't know, drinking pina coladas. That is the best drink. But ultimately, like, change is never going to happen without all of us being a part of that and getting the people around us involved to be a part of that. And I think we've like let the world operate on the honor system, especially the fashion industry, for a really long time. And it turns out we can't do that, right? Like we got to get out there and we got to make our voices heard, and we have to educate others. We have to change the way we live, which sounds scary, but it turns out it's actually kind of fun as long as you don't fall doing laundry or whatever, like me. But we are at a turning point right now. I feel it. I have been working on Clothes Horse since 2020, and we'll get into that whole journey. In the beginning, I was like, wow, everything is so hopeless. Why do I even wear clothes? Like, should I become a nudist? Like, what's the solution here? And here it is, like almost 4 years later, and I see the change happening around us. These conversations that all of us have been having amongst ourselves for years now, they're talking about it on like the Today Show. Do you know what I mean? Like, people who never thought about their clothes or where they came from or what the impact of them was, they're thinking about it now. And that's because of everyone in this room and all the other people that you talk to about these things. Like, we're at the beginning of what I think of as just like a new era. And it's clothes are a part of it, but it's really about like a whole different way of life for all of us.
You know, that's a really good point, because when I had my own brand in the 90s in Los Angeles, I moved back here to Arizona, and I had to do something different, and I stopped manufacturing, and I started upcycling t-shirts into ball gowns, because that was something I could do from Arizona, and everybody thought it was kind of crazy. They're like, what is this? And I'm like, it's sustainable. It's something like that, you know, isn't going to be mass produced, and I think this is the future of fashion, and I don't think anybody got it back then. And then I was kind of consulting and helping brands get started, and you know, I would say, well, why don't you pick a more sustainable fabric, or, you know, maybe try to encourage the sustainability. Nobody really got it, but now every single person who comes in here has that as one of their most important things that they're trying to achieve in their brand, is making sure that it's sustainable. They are instantly like, all the fabrics in your sourcing library, are there any sustainable ones? Like the first question people ask, where it used to not even be on anybody's thoughts before. So there is change, and it's because of people like you. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm listening and learning so much from your podcast. This has been an incredible, like, you are the most, like, amazing researcher. You have found so much amazing information, and I can't wait to share some of that. I want to hear first, though, how did you end up in this position? Like, how did this happen? Where'd your life take you from, the beginning until you became, I know we are kind of close, huh? It's me being a fangirl. I just want to sit really close to you.
I wanted to see the screen because I know that there's like photos in here that I shared. And might want to prop up my ankle a little bit.
So I'm going to pull one of those photos up first to start. So before we even get on the topic of the sustainability part, let's learn a little bit about Amanda so we can kind of hear why it led her into this. So we're going to start by just checking out some fun little pictures of you from when you were a kid.
Okay, well, there are two really important things to know about me. One is that my style clearly has not changed very much. And two, everything that has kind of happened to me in life feels like a complete surprise. The fact that I'm here talking to all of you today, that I've made 200 episodes of a podcast about sustainability and fashion and our roles as consumers and humans, still surprises me every single day. Having a career in fashion, which is ultimately what led to Clothes Horse, also major surprise to me. Here I am. I mean, I am a style icon. I think we can all agree with that. Like, even in that soccer uniform, looking pretty good, right? I grew up in a really small town in Pennsylvania, and certainly, like, working in the fashion industry or even the jobs in the fashion industry, like, not even something on my radar. I grew up very low income. I literally grew up in a trailer park. Fashion doesn't come to look for people who grew up in a trailer park, right? And I loved clothes, always have, but I just thought, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna try to be middle class. Like, I'm gonna become a teacher, I will say for a long time I thought I wanted to be an astronomer. I was under this a lot of confusion. I thought that if you were an astronomer, you got to meet aliens first. So that was like I remember in 4th grade being like, that's what I'm doing when I grow up. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, someone was like, you probably won't get to meet aliens. And that made me change my career a few times, like what I was thinking about doing. So ultimately, my big goal growing up was like, the first thing I'm gonna do is move away from this very small town in Pennsylvania, and I'm gonna go away to New York City, which is what I did. I went to NYU. I studied painting, which meant I had absolutely no job skills. And after that, I was like, wow, I can't even afford to live here. I'm not an astronomer as planned. I'm gonna move to Chicago, which was like also a random choice, but Chicago is really cool, and if you have never been there, you should go. It's awesome. And I lived there for several years. I worked as a graphic designer. I really talked my way into that job. I said, listen, I'm gonna go to this weekend-long training thing at a Holiday Inn and learn how to do things on computers. That's like basically how I got that job. Probably also they were like, oh, we can pay you a lot less. This is great. So that's what I was doing. So here's some pictures of me very young. It's funny to me to start with that first slide where I'm not dressed unlike how I am now, but there were stages in between where I wore a lot of black. And I moved to Chicago very young, and I ended up meeting someone who kind of like changed my life, which is my daughter's father. And a lot of stuff happened rapid fire, as it does in your early 20s. Before you knew it, I was pregnant. And then my partner passed away a few months before our daughter was born. And life-changing experience, obviously. That was so long ago now, it still feels like, sad. And suddenly it was like, what am I gonna do with my life? Like, everything I thought was gonna happen is now not happening. I'm gonna have a kid by myself. Like, what am I gonna do? And I decided to move to Portland, Oregon, because my father lives out there, and I had this idea, like, there's something magical about it there. There's these like huge mountains, because I'm from the East Coast, and this is like a huge mountain to us, okay? And this is like, no offense, this is not that big of a mountain. I don't even know if that qualifies as a mountain. Is that a hill? I don't know. Anyway, so I'd never really seen mountains that were like covered with snow and trees that were like as tall as buildings, and the air had this feeling to it. And I was like, you know what, I think if I move to Portland, Oregon, I'm gonna get through this. Like, I'm gonna have hope. And something that I have learned time and time again, and that I think about a lot right now when the world seems so hopeless, is that finding hope, giving ourselves hope, that's how we keep going, right? That's how we grow. That's how we thrive. So the idea that I was gonna move to the other side of the country and get better and get through my grief, it gave me hope to keep going. So I moved out there. I could not find a job at all. Everybody there had also maybe learned how to do graphic design at the Holiday Inn, and and the disadvantage I had is I didn't know anyone there, and I would show up with my baby on my hip, and they would be like, I know that's illegal, but they definitely weren't hiring me because of that, So a year into it, I am like selling all my belongings, and all I did was eat quesadillas and 25-cent bagels. Like, that's all I could afford. And I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go get a job at Urban Outfitters, because I worked there in college. It had been a total nightmare. I hated it. I never shopped from that brand again, because I was like, this sucks. I'm gonna get a job at Urban Outfitters. They'll hire me because I've worked there before, which they did. I walked in with my baby on my hip, and they were like, oh, we're not hiring. And I was like, well, I used to work for Urban Outfitters. And they were like, oh, yeah, you know what? We might be hiring.
Oh my God.
And I got a job right away. So my first day there as a part-time seasonal sales associate, it's my birthday, and I was like, this is great. Finally, I'm gonna make some money. They put me back in the back by the fitting rooms, and I just stood at a cart all day, letting people in and out. It's like they can only have 5 things in the fitting room. So you go in the fitting room, you inspect it, then you count their things, then you put them in there. Then when they leave, you take them back, you go back in there, you inspect the room to make sure they didn't steal anything. Then you fold and hang the things and put it away. And I did that for 12 hours because they forgot I was there. And
Oh
I
my
know.
God.
And it's getting close to closing, and someone comes up, like a manager, and is like, hey, how long have you been here? And I was like, oh, like 12 hours. And they're like, you need to go home. That's like illegal, so please leave. And I was like, oh my God, I just made $84. This is like huge. And so I ended up they were like, wow, this is someone who will work 12 hours on their first day, and it'll be so unproblematic, we won't even notice. We should give this person a promotion. It took a little bit longer than that. It took like 6-8 months, but still. And eventually I was a department manager, and I was like, I'm like rich by Portland standards. In like 2003, I have a full-time job with health insurance, and sure, I don't make enough money to take the bus, but like I am like stable. And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do next. And I was thinking about going to nursing school. That seemed really practical. Although, as I was telling my friend Janelle today, I'm like extremely squeamish. But I was like, I'll get used to it, I'll get used to it over time. And I was starting to look into schools and begin the application process. And we had a bunch of visitors from the Urban Outfitters home office, which is based in Philadelphia. And for them to come, the executives to come all the way from Philadelphia to Portland is something that happens like once every 10 years. And I gave them a walkthrough, and I wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to impress anyone. I have a lot of thoughts about the stuff that we sell and how it could be better and how we could drive more sales and what customers say. And I was just giving them that kind of information. And at the end, the person who it turned out was the director of planning said, how would you like to come to Philadelphia and be a buyer? And I laughed. Why did I laugh? 1, what is a buyer? Who knows? 2, that's like so many thousands of miles away, I don't even know. And 3, you're teasing me, right? And a week later, I was flying out there for an interview. Now, in the interview, I said to the person who ended up being my boss, so, what's this job? What's a buyer do?
Oh my God.
And she paused for a moment, and then she said, well, there's emails. Sometimes you talk on the phone, you open the mail, and I was like, whoa, I can definitely do this. Of course, being a buyer is so much more than that, right? So I moved across the country to Philadelphia and started working as a buyer for Urban Outfitters. I worked there for a really long time. I worked for the company for 10 years. And I think I started really at a pivotal time, which we're gonna talk about this more as we move through my career. I started before fast fashion. Now, Urban Outfitters was never exactly the best quality. But we weren't exactly fast fashion as we know it now. And it was expensive, right? And in the beginning of my career, we adhered to basically the same procedure, the same calendar as every other brand or retailer out there. And that meant when we were working on a delivery of product, we'd probably start 6 to 8 months before it delivered. So right now it's like what? It's almost May, right? We would probably be working on like January right now. You know, we're so far ahead. I never knew like what time of year I was really living in. By the time the stuff delivered, I was so sick of it because I'd been thinking about it for 8 months. But we needed that time to get it right. You know, we would start with a concept. All of us on the buying side, we would come to the table with like data and like a line plan, and then the designers would sketch. Then we would all meet and talk about the sketches. We'd pick the ones that we liked. They would go into sampling. The first sample would come back, and it's always, the first time I got a bunch of stuff back from sample, I was really excited. I'm gonna make stuff that people are gonna buy. Me, this person from a small town in Pennsylvania, this is gonna be amazing. My boss said to me, hey, like, don't get too excited. The first samples are usually really bad. And I was like, how? I sent them all this information. We had all these great photos, like, a nightmare. At that point, I was wearing his shoes, and I like cried. I was like, I didn't know shoes could be this ugly. You know?
Hey, I want to interject really quickly because what you said is totally going to ring true with like all the entrepreneurs in the room, because that's the first thing I tell everybody is that first sample is just rough. It's just there to kind of start the process, and then you have to refine that, and it takes multiple samples to get through till you finally have that version, and that's months of work.
It's months. It takes so much time. You open the first sample. If it's apparel, you take it in, you get the fit model, the tech designer there, you do a fitting, they're cutting it up, they're safety pinning it, they're drawing all over it. They send a whole bunch of notes after that. Another sample comes, it's closer. It's like 3, 4, sometimes 5 samples. In my career, there are designs we've worked on that like 10 samples deep, we just had to give up. Like, this is not a thing that works like with gravity, basically. And, and you know, that's time, that's money, that's materials. This stuff is shipping back and forth across the country, across the world. And, you know, by the time we would get it right, then we could say like, okay, go into production. And often those orders would ship across the ocean on a boat. And it would take 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer if there was weather or there's a backup at the port, issues with customs. And so we needed 6 to 8 months, and it would go really fast. You know, it took us that long to get it right. And that time to get it right is the thing that disappeared as we got into the fast fashion era. And once again, I wasn't working at like Marc Jacobs or something. I was working at Urban Outfitters, a store that primarily sells stuff to like teenagers. We weren't selling high-end products, but we still took 6 to 8 months to get it right. In fact, I was thinking the other day about how one of the first sets of categories I managed was actually gloves, scarves, all kinds of knits. And in January, I would start on October deliveries because the yarn takes even longer. Same thing with sweaters, right? You just start so far out. And I'm going to tell you, years later, I would be managing sweaters again, and I would have like 6 weeks, maybe 2 months to get it all right. So I did a whole series of the podcast about like why new clothes are kind of garbage, and this is a big part of it, is the time, right? The time is so important. And you know, when we talk about like slow fashion, which is a term I prefer over sustainable fashion because I think that word slow is so important. We slow down the process of creating the clothes. As customers, as people who wear clothes, which I couldn't help but notice all of you are, we slow down the process of buying clothing for ourselves, right? We take more time to think about it, we buy less of it. And we slow down that time period that the clothes are with us. We wear them for a lot longer by taking care of them. So I love the term slow fashion, and to me it is literally the opposite of fast fashion because it's all about time. And as I was like, first I just gotta say, I was pulling some of these photos from old Urban Outfitters catalogs, and I was like, I can't believe I've reached the point in my life where young people scan old Urban Outfitters catalogs and put them on Pinterest, and are like, this is so retro, this is so vintage, because I literally worked on this stuff. All the photos up here are things that I worked on at Urban, and it was funny to sit down and say like, oh, I remember that. It took like so long to get that right, and then it finally was, because when I thought about later in my career, I didn't have that thought at all. I was like, oh man, that was a whirlwind. Right. But these, I was like, that took like 7 samples, just thinking about it. So yeah, this is a bunch of stuff I worked on there. I like the progression here. In the far left here, this is me, my like first weekish at Urban Outfitters as a buyer. You come across here, and there I am at the end. I've turned into Stevie Nicks. But it was quite a process working there. It was a long time. Should we move on here? Okay. So my next job was at ModCloth. I kind of had this existential crisis where I was like, it seems like I'm pretty good at being a buyer, but is that just because I am like the Urban Outfitters customer? Like, what if I worked somewhere else? Also, I was like, they're soon gonna fire me because I'm getting too old, so I need to go work somewhere else. I mean, I'm like in my 30s now. So I went to ModCloth, which was a totally different customer base, totally different way of doing business. And this is like around the time where fast fashion is like setting in really deeply. And I'm gonna tell you, like, I didn't really start to see in full focus how much the industry had sped up until seriously like 2019. So I go onto ModCloth and I'm like, this is different. We're definitely going faster. Like I would literally go place orders for something that was going to arrive in a week or two. It was getting pretty wild, but I was like, well, this is a different business model. We're online. We have like infinite SKUs. I can look back now and I can say, starting my career before 2008, I can see that is the dividing line, right? So at 2008, I'm still at Urban Outfitters. It's the recession, comes in hard. And we were in this position where we were like, okay, we need to put everything on sale. And that was every brand out there, right? Like, we've got to put all the clothes on sale so people will buy them. And people still did buy them. But then what happened is, after that, no one wanted to buy anything at full price, right? So we're in this quandary of like, what do we do? I will tell you, 2009 was like a really, really tough time for the fashion industry, because 2008, the recession kind of started towards the end of the year. 2009 comes around, it's like, it's not the holidays anymore. We're not gonna get the high of sales of that. We gotta buckle down. My boss made me, and every buyer had to do this, go out and call on the phone, which for me is a personal nightmare. I'm an emailer. Made us call every single vendor and ask them for a 15% discount on anything we had on order.
Wait a minute, before you go further, the vendors are already being pressed to deliver things that are unrealistic in the first place.
Yeah. I will say back then, we pressed them on price, but we didn't press them on time. But don't worry, we were gonna start doing that too. But at that point, we weren't. And I would be like, hey, I'm not gonna play games with you. Like, there are people who are buyers who are like, I'm gonna give them a really unrealistic price and then just keep going back and forth with them until they meet with the price I need. And I would just be like, I need this to be $8. Period. And they would be like, okay, and then I would get the $8. But I knew on their end, they were sacrificing things to make that happen.
Why do you think they said yes?
I gotta tell you, like, it was awesome when I came up here and y'all applauded for me and people listened to Clothes Horse. If you're a buyer for Urban Outfitters and it's like 2007, you are like a Kardashian. Like, people are like, I can't believe you work for Urban Outfitters. Vendors will do anything to say that they sell to Urban Outfitters. And so the power dynamic is so off. I could say anything I wanted and I would get it, which was weird when I went to ModCloth because we were a lot smaller and suddenly people were like pushing back on me and I was like, wait, what?
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah, don't you know who I am? I'm a buyer for ModCloth. But that power dynamic is still skewed. Like, and it doesn't matter. It could be like, what's the least cool brand you could think of? Name one.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Well, let's just say it was Amazon. Okay.
Okay.
You could be like, I work at Amazon and I'm a buyer and I'm only going to buy 20 units of this. You're going to give me the price that I want, or I'll go somewhere else. And the vendor will be like, okay, yeah, that's fine. because there's so much fear, there's so much competition. If they don't give you what you wanted, well, you'll just go somewhere else, right?
That's what I was wondering. I think like all of the factories are kind of at that point where they just need the work and they know you're going to get it from somebody else. So that's just a race to the bottom for everybody.
For everyone. So I call all my vendors and I say I need a 15% discount, and I'm dreading this because this is like, to me, just the rudest thing I could ever do. Like, I thought we were partners here, and now I'm saying you already gave me this like rock bottom pricing. Now I want 15% off of that. And everybody was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I have no choice. And I was like, wow, this is like how messed up this is. And it was interesting, like it was a whole year of like, okay, there's a freeze on promotions and raises. They asked us to bring our own office supplies in and just all kinds, they canceled the Christmas party, all these things. And that year, the company actually made a record profit margin, like historically, during this like really bad year for the business. And I look back and I'm like, oh wow, it's because we squeezed everybody on pricing and none of us got raises and I had to bring Post-its to work, so that was a hard lesson for me, and seeing like this is how this industry really works. And as we get into 2009, we're like, okay, people only want to buy stuff on sale, or they want to go to Forever 21 or H&M. And this is an era, you go into a Forever 21 and tank tops are $1.90. Many of you sew. Many of you have seen fabric. How could you make a tank top for $1.90? It's got elastic strapping. I look at the make, I'm like, there's the hem, they're sewing in the label. Like, you couldn't even pay for the yardage of fabric for $1.90. And here we are, we're at Urban Outfitters, and we're like, okay, well, people love these $1.90 tank tops, and we sell them for $18. Like, what do we do, right? I know, we'll put them on promo all the time. So they say $18, but we sell them 2 for $20 or something, right? So really people are paying $10, and it's not $1.90, but we're more premium. And we start doing all of these sort of like promos and sales, but what we're doing, we're saying we're not gonna take down the prices on these price tags because we don't wanna be Forever 21. We look down on them, right? We don't wanna be H&M, like that's not cool. We're gonna keep the same prices we've always had, but we'll always offer deals. And how we offer all those deals and have all these big sales and do extra 50% off sale and all these other things, how we do that is we say, oh, okay, so that tank top that we usually sell for $18, we know now we're only gonna sell them for $9. So rather than making a tank top that sells at $18, we're gonna make a tank top that is just as profitable when it sells for $9. But we're gonna put 18 on the price tag. We're gonna keep that. So you buy this this $18 tank top that you think you got a hot deal on, but really you got a $9 tank top. So maybe we spent $3 to make that instead of $6. And then you're like, how much different could that be? What if it was a dress? It was $88 in 2008. It still says it's $88 in 2009, but we're gonna sell it for $40 most of the time. Suddenly you're getting a dress. We used to maybe have $25 to make a dress. Now we have $10. And this is where you see the quality coming down.
That goes back down to the time that it takes to actually develop the product. So instead of taking all that time to make sure it fits okay, we're gonna cut out all of those revisions and just go with that first one.
And it just got faster and faster. And as I left Urban Outfitters and went to work at ModCloth, I couldn't quite see it. But I was starting to see like the pricing on stuff. This was interesting to me too, because I will tell you, the pricing and the profit margin at ModCloth was a lot lower than Urban Outfitters, which makes sense, less operational costs, buying in less volume. But I was kind of like, how do you guys stay in business with only a 65% margin when I'm used to buying like stuff at 80? And ultimately, ModCloth did basically almost go bankrupt and be bought by Walmart, so maybe it wasn't working for them either. But we didn't sell as much stuff on sale, which I think was a big telling point. So next, I went to Nasty Gal, and when I was like trying to think of pictures to put up for Nasty Gal, I thought it would be better to just put up some really great headlines about what it was like to work there. I always tell people that at Nasty Gal, I learned how everything can go wrong and what you should never do. And that is an important part of being good at your job too. So at Nasty Gal, the business model was pretty similar to ModCloth. We were buying a lot of really inexpensive clothing, but making it look nicer with like photography. And we never stuck to a strategy for more than 3 weeks, so we went out of business. There were a lot of things that we did wrong there. We didn't listen to our customer. We stopped making things fit. We would just be like, well, we're out of time. It'll fit somebody, and move on, right? This is where I started to see the shortened timeline to get things right, because we bought stuff from brands and from vendors, but we also made our own stuff. And we didn't take 6 or 8 months to get it right. We took 3 months. And that felt so fast to me. And so what would happen, and everything we did was so elaborate, because the sort of design direction for Nasty Gal was that we would take runway styles and make them, I don't know, like lower price point versions, right? Well, some of this stuff is really, really hard. And for example, we were doing way too many things with like bra cups in them. I was just like, we cannot get these the right shape or fit ever. Like, we would just go, we would be 2 fittings in, and it would be like, well, it'll fit someone, we gotta move on, just go to production. So the first sample would come in and be terrible, the next one we'd be like, oh, this still looks terrible. Yeah, well, we don't have time, just do it. And so we had crazy high returns. I always tell people think that Nasty Gal went out of business because like we weren't doing enough sales or people were over it, but here's what really happened at Nasty Gal. The company was spending more than $200 to acquire a customer. And that meant marketing emails, discounts, Instagram ads. This was an era of Facebook ads, right? All this money to acquire a customer. The customer would come to the website. They might spend $100. I believe the average order for new customers was like around 90. They would return almost everything, if not all of it, because the fit was a nightmare, because we only had 3 months to get everything right from concept to delivery. And they would return everything and never come back again, which meant not only did we lose $240 on acquiring them, we lost the money of processing that return. And that's why Nasty Gal went out of business, because we weren't making product that people actually wanted to keep. And we disenchanted new customers like almost immediately. And this was the first time I saw this really catching up with us, but boy, is that all I've seen since then. Where if we'd slowed things down, instead of having 3 months, we had 6 months, maybe those bra cups wouldn't have been weird and square, right? Or like the zipper would have really stayed zipped up, or yeah. And we couldn't do that. It was always a race against time. And the product was always really bad. I remember one story that, it makes me laugh, but like in a really sad way. This is mortifying. We had this bathing suit come in. It had been a bestseller before. It's a tale as old as time in fashion. This was a brand we were selling. I want to say it was called Beach Riot or something like that. Well, we don't make a great margin off of it. It's a bestseller. You know what we'll do? We'll make our own version. Oh, guess what? We really need to deliver that in a month, but you know, this is a brand new design for us. We'll just do it anyway. Oh, we actually need it in 3 weeks because we are gonna shoot it. It's gonna be a part of a marketing story. So it gets made locally in LA, which I don't even want to think about the conditions there at that time. And it delivers, and you know, people buy it, they all go on spring break, and everybody gets in the pool with their bathing suit and it falls off because it's not the right kind of fabric for swim. Because no one saw a sample, no one QA'd the sample when it came in, and all these customers
Tested it.
no one tested it because you got 3 weeks, right? And everybody had like I would like just fall over dead if this happened to me, if I was like at a pool party and I got in my whole swimsuit, so, like I can't even think about it. And this was like hundreds of customers, right? And it's just like, maybe we could have said, let's just buy from that brand this year and we'll develop it now for next year. No time. And like no one, obviously everyone involved in making that swimsuit had a lot of remorse, but the executives were like, easy come, easy go, let's move on. And
imagine all that effort that went into that for the people who made it, all, you know.
I know, the materials, it was not
waste.
swim appropriate fabric because no one even had time to source the right fabric. It's crazy. We sold hundreds, probably thousands of these swimsuits all in like 2 weeks, and then everybody was just like, what a nightmare. And it was just par for the course. So Nasty Gal went bankrupt. I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to go work at Forever 21 now. I knew it was inevitable, and I was like this close to that happening. But I ended up moving to the Pacific Northwest to work for a brand called Wild Fang. And in the beginning, I was like, I will just be like really transparent for you, literally my worst job ever. And I worked in a place where people's bathing suits fell off. And you saw the headlines for Nasty Gal, right? Worst job I'd ever had. And it was because it was like a brand that was like kind of a darling in terms of like, you know, it was like give back oriented, like community oriented, feminist. But it was the first time I'd worked somewhere where someone was like the leadership was like, the stuff we sell doesn't matter. It's the marketing, it's the brand. So what do we have? Crappy clothes that make our customers feel bad, that we're constantly, I'm like QAing and like trying to fix things that come in because they're so terrible. And I did that job for a couple years, and I am proud to say that like I grew their sales about 8 times what they were when I started, because I am really good at spreadsheets and business, but it was a really, really hard job. And so when I left that, I was like, I'm done. I'm seeing how wasteful this industry is. Even at Wild Fang, there was this obsession with exclusive prints, which I get. You don't want to buy prints off the market, right? You want it to be exclusive to you. We would print an entire run of a fabric and then use like 30% of it and dispose of the rest of it. And like, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we're not talking about the little bolts of fabric at Joann. You know, we're talking about big industrial bolts of fabric. And here I was working for this company that supposedly cared so much about social justice, but we're throwing away a whole, I don't even want to think about how much fabric, right? And we don't do anything to validate that our factories are okay. We never speak about the people who make these clothes. And my boss would sometimes tell me, because people would reach out and be like, can you just make something up that will make them feel better if they ask about who makes our clothes? And it was not sitting well with me at all. And it was just like kind of eroding at me. And I was like, everybody I know who's worked in fashion for a long time gets to that point where you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. And it was tough for me because I'm like, I'm a single parent. Without my income, we have nothing, right? I have to keep working at these jobs where I don't like the values of these companies, and I don't like to think about, I mean, I do have moments where I'm like, oh man, I have made so much stuff that is in landfills right now, you know, and at this point I'm starting
Or has
to think,
been made by people that weren't treated fairly and
for
unethically.
sure.
And it's like, especially for a brand that cares so much about women, the majority of people making our clothes have been women.
That's right.
Traditionally,
That's
too.
right. And many
So-
of them are mothers. Like, these jobs are their best opportunity to take care of their families. When they don't have those jobs or those incomes, they are vulnerable to so much violence, which we saw happening in 2020, which we'll get to. But it just wasn't sitting well with me. So I left Wild Fang. It was kind of a surprise to me. One day I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'll tell my husband later. And I put in my notice. My boss was like, well, I was thinking about firing you anyway. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I started just working for small brands and clients. I really only wanted to work with like women-owned businesses. We're not there yet. We got to go back because I had one more job before the pandemic. So, and I was working with like some sustainable brands. But then I get a call one day. It's from a recruiter at Urban Outfitters. And have they got a deal for me? It's a new sustainable brand they're launching. And I was like, I don't know, but they did say sustainable. This is what I'm like, it's on my mind. So I signed an NDA, and they're like, we're launching a rental brand, which ended up being Nuuly. So I was the original buyer for Nuuly. Everything that was on the website for the first 6 months after launch was literally picked out by me. And I was really excited about this. I was like, how do we change our relationship with clothing? This seems like a perfect solution. As I'm working there, I start to realize otherwise. For one, we're buying all the same stuff that Urban Outfitters and Free People and Anthropologie and all these other fast fashion brands are making. So we're just supporting this infrastructure that creates waste, that makes stuff that doesn't fit, that exploits humans. And on top of that, the quality of this stuff was so bad that we couldn't rent a lot of it out more than one time. And so we have this like developing inventory problem of stuff that no one would want to rent that has been rented one time. Just racks and racks and racks and racks. My team, I sent my like assistant buyers to the warehouse just to shave sweaters for 2 days because they had pilled up after one rental. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we were dealing with. And I realize, as I have come to understand more and more, is that A lot of times when the industry says, we're going to do something sustainable, we're going to offer you this new option, it's more like, and I think it's pretty cynical, it's less about fixing the problem and more like, it's like, oh, I have a huge tumor. Well, let's just put a Band-Aid on it and it will be fine. And that's kind of what rental, it kind of still is. But also, it's a cynical play to not lose money because more and more people, everyone in this room, right, we have come to realize that clothing is not great and it's wasteful and that there's an impact and that we need to buy less. And companies are seeing these sales going away. How can they continue to protect their revenue stream? They offer things like rental or resale platform or all kinds of other things. And working at Nuuly, I was like, this is not what I thought it would be. But here's the really important thing. And this is like something when I launched Clotheshorse, I thought about all the time. Here I was, back on the campus where I had begun my career, way back before the recession. And suddenly now I can see in clear focus how much this industry has changed thanks to the fast fashionification of everything. Like now I can see the proof because I was there before and now I'm there after. And here was what was happening. We didn't even have 3 months to get a product right. We had 2 months. We were actually encouraged, and this, when I say we, I mean not just all of us buyers at Nuuly, but the buyers at Anthro, the buyers at Urban, the buyers at Free People, to save about a third to half of our budget for every month to place orders for things that would deliver in the same month that hadn't been made yet. It wasn't like we were like going into a warehouse and being like, we'll take that, that, and that. This is product that didn't even exist yet. And how they were able to do that is one, we weren't fitting it, we weren't getting the samples right, and two, everything shipped via air across the ocean. It didn't need 4 to 6 weeks anymore to get here. It needed 5 days. And the environmental impact of shipping all those clothes on an airplane every single day, I'm gonna tell you, no one should ever make you feel bad about taking a flight to go on vacation or see your friends because it's nothing in comparison to that. And I mean, I'm telling you, like almost everything we ordered shipped via plane. Whereas when I started my career, if you wanted to ship something via plane because it's so expensive, you had to get special permission. You had to write a letter, literally print it out and get the signature of the president and then have your assistant take it over to traffic so that they would book a flight. Like they weren't, it was like a big deal, right? Now suddenly everything is shipping via air. It still costs a lot of money. So what are we doing? We're spending even less money to make the clothing to recoup the cost of those flights. And we're doing that because we're so worried about buying into the wrong trend in a world where now there are infinite new trends that come and go. And so we want to get the stuff as close to being on trend as possible. So we're doing it super fast. And the other thing is that our margin targets were higher than they had ever been before. So we were paying even less money for the stuff that was being made. And then you think about, okay, and then also we were paying to air it. Suddenly, we would have, you know, there were a lot of dresses that I was buying. There were $8, including air freight. Air freight is usually about $3 a unit. What kind of dress do you get that's made for $5? And who, well, how were the people who made it paid, right? And so this is when I start to see this. And then the pandemic began. And I lost my job almost immediately. Turns out people don't rent a lot of clothes when they have to sit at home all the time. And, you know, I cried. I played The Sims for a long time. I was like starting to resent my Sims for like not being able to live their own life. And I was making tortillas like every single day. And I was freaking out because I was like, I have reached that level in my career where there are almost no jobs left, right? I'm not gonna have a job for a long time if I do again. And my whole identity has been wrapped up in being this career, which I don't have anymore. They cut off my insurance immediately. They gave me 2 weeks of severance. I'm like freaking out about money. And you know, I'm having serious conversations with my husband where we're like, we're gonna have to move. Like we have to move ASAP to stay afloat. And all of a sudden there's this one morning where my phone is just blowing up with texts and it's from all of my friends sending me screenshots of articles from all over the internet about how URBN, the parent company of Urban Outfitters and Anthropologie and Free People and Nuuly has a surprise profit at the hardest time of business ever. And I sit there and I think, wow, well, let me tell you a little bit about where that profit is. I mean, one, it's all the people like me who lost their jobs. Two, it's that the thing I did for the last 2 weeks before I got laid off is cancel every single thing we had on order, even if it was already at the port and getting loaded onto the truck to come to the warehouse. And it wasn't just me at Newly doing that. It was every brand on that campus. It was every brand around the world. And I mean, vendors were crying on the phone with me. People lost their jobs that week. People lost their businesses that week. And I thought, what about all the people who made those clothes? Did they get paid? Well, I got news for you, they didn't. And they lost their jobs. So they didn't get paid for work they'd already done. Because that's the thing about the fashion industry. And someone was talking about this in a meeting yesterday. If you're a farmer and you sell your crop, you get paid for it right away when you deliver it, right? In fashion, if you make a bunch of clothes for someone, you don't get paid for it for like 30, 60, 90, 120 days. So you fronted all the money for the materials and the sewing, and somehow that money's gonna come back, and then you're gonna be able to pay everyone. Well, now no one can get paid for anything. The people who sewed the clothes, the people who made the fabric, the people who made the buttons and the zippers and the labels and the poly bags and the boxes, no one's getting paid. And no one has money to eat or live, right? And I'm sitting on the couch at home getting like so riled up about this. And I'm like, how would people feel if they knew what really happens with the clothes? Because people love clothes. Raise your hand if you love clothes. I love clothes, right? I love getting dressed up. There's nothing better than wearing like a cool outfit to like make your whole day better. And people like worship fashion. It's like so important and so glamorous. What if they knew it was like this? And then I was like, I'm just gonna make a podcast about that. Now, did I know anything about making a podcast? No, not at all. I'm very lucky my husband is a professional audio engineer, so we had like fancy equipment that like I literally never would have had. And he taught me how to do editing and all this other stuff, and I started making Clothes Horse. And that was in 2020, and now we're like literally just released episode 200 last week.
Can we give her a round of applause for that?
Thank you. And somehow we haven't run out of stuff to talk about, like, because it just keeps going. And the other thing I found as I was working on Clothes Horse is that like there was this whole other arm of it, which was like social media. And there were people who have never listened to a podcast, but want to get information on social media. So then I was like, oh, remember when I was a graphic designer like a million years ago? I'm gonna get back into that too. And I started sharing information on Instagram, and I do TikTok now, though I'm not a huge fan. And just sharing information in all these different formats to reach people. And so I'm gonna tell you, some of these Instagram posts take 2 to 4 hours to make, but I can share something that I already posted like 6 months ago, and people are like, new people show up and are like, thank you for telling me this. Like I posted about Rana Plaza yesterday, and I just thought everyone knew about Rana Plaza by now. Is there anyone here who doesn't know about Rana Plaza? Okay, so Rana Plaza, 11 years ago yesterday, it was a huge building in Bangladesh. The first floor, there were like businesses, like stores and whatnot. And then all the floors on top of it were factories where clothing was sewn. It's an epic fail in so many ways. The city kind of like, even though it didn't pass, or town, I guess, even though it didn't pass inspection and it was not approved to have factories on it because like they're much heavier, the machinery and whatnot, it was not approved for that. It was built on top of like a dried out pond, so it was like sinking. And the town was sort of like, well, we just gotta let people build factories in there anyway, because if we don't let them, they're gonna go to another town or another country to make clothes, and we gotta stay competitive to keep this economy rolling. And there was a lot of corruption involved too. The people who built the building, they were like skimming off the top and using subpar materials. Everything was bad. So there were cracks appearing in the bottom floor of the building. And everybody who lived or worked down there evacuated. They were told to by the town. The factory owners made people come in and work anyway that day. And people are up there sewing clothes, and the building collapsed. So many people died, primarily women. Thousands of people were injured. And in the aftermath of this, they find labels in these factories for all kinds of brands that we know. And these people were just in there sewing cheap clothing all day, and they died sewing cheap clothing.
You know, I also heard this, I don't know if it was true, that the doors were locked because they didn't trust.
Because they didn't want people to leave.
Yeah.
And I think no one should die to make clothing, you know? No one should die to make clothing. And the thing that made me the saddest of all, really, I mean, there's a lot here, maybe not sad, angry, is that the brands whose stuff was being made there allegedly didn't even know it was being made there because it had been subcontracted out so many times. Every time you subcontract out a contract, the next group of people gets paid less. So I want you to think about how little the people actually making the clothes were being paid. And yeah, like they were told to come in, they weren't allowed to leave, they couldn't evacuate by the time the building collapsed. And I thought everybody knew about Rana Plaza, but every time, I mean, some of you didn't, right? And so the other thing I'll just say that makes me really hopeful about this world is that we're all sharing this information every day, and all of you who just heard about Rana Plaza for the first time are gonna tell someone else that you know about it. And it's gonna make them think a lot. Even if the first time you tell them, they're kind of like, I don't wanna hear it, it's in there, and they're thinking about it. And for me, that has been the most important part of Clotheshorse, is telling people what I know and what I've learned. I've learned so much along the way as well. And getting those conversations started, and nothing makes my day more than someone reaching out to me and saying, hey, I started listening to Clotheshorse because my friend told me about it. And I only buy secondhand clothes now. Or I'm trying to start my own brand where we only use upcycled materials. Or I am like protesting at this store right now. And that's like, it kind of go full circle. Like, this all starts with us and the people in our lives, because we don't need another Rana Plaza. We don't need more crappy clothes that don't fit us and make us feel bad. We need a good world where clothes are fun. Clothes make us happy. Clothes make us feel our best. We don't need a world that sells us clothes that make us feel bad, right? And I think that when we talk about these kinds of things, it can feel like, what do I do? Like, the first year that I was working on Clotheshorse, I wanted to just like go fight people. Like, I wanted to confront them and be like, why do you buy things from Shein? Are you a monster? Whatever. Well, I didn't do that, is the good news, because Clotheshorse may not be around. But I was like, I'm so angry all the time, and I have to like squish it down and be like, guys, everything's gonna be okay. But even at that point, I was like, I don't know what we do next. What I know is that we talk about this, and people think about it, and we're gonna come to some ideas. And over the past few years, what I have learned alongside this entire community is that there are things that we can do, even as one person, that are very significant. You know, we can change the way we shop, right? We can buy less stuff. We can make our things last. We can shop from small businesses and locally. We can, this is what our passion is, we can start our own businesses where we make things better. We can educate the people around us, which is so important. I mean, I just told some of you the first time about Rana Plaza, and I bet you're gonna be thinking about it. It's gonna change some things for you. Sharing what we know, because we take this stuff for granted, is step one. And so I just encourage everybody to, like, over the next couple weeks, have conversations with people about what we're talking about right now. And it doesn't have to be like, we're not gonna be friends anymore if you shop at Shein, because guess what happens? You lose your friend and they shop at Shein, they double down, right? What we do instead is we say, hey, I noticed that that dress is already torn. Can I just tell you like why that happens? And it sucks. Like, why do they think so little of the planet and the people and the customers that this is what we get? Like, you can have casual conversations about people where you're just dropping knowledge on them and you're planting that seed of change, because I felt that seed of change grow within me. That's why I spend all this time on all this stuff. And when I feel like I'm like pollinating people, and then they're pollinating one another, and it just grows and grows, and then we have this whole garden that is the slow fashion movement.
You know, one of the things that I got from listening was really important, that you were pointing out it could seem overwhelming and kind of daunting to have to change your entire way of shopping and everything. But you don't have to just dive in and do it all at once. It's every little bit counts, and just take it one little step at a time. Pick one thing to start with and make that little change. And then eventually you're going to be motivated to make another one until everything changes. It doesn't have to be all at once.
That's
So
right.
that's a
That's
really good
right.
point.
You don't have to go home and throw out all your clothes and start over.
Right.
You don't have to have a
Don't do that.
You don't have to have a capsule wardrobe unless that's what you like. You're not always going to be able to buy everything you need from a sustainable brand or secondhand, but you can try. And you can buy a lot less stuff. You can slow it down, right? Think more about what you do buy and
Intentionally buy
intentionally.
things.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, like, listen, I worked as a buyer in fast fashion, okay? If you don't think I haven't had so many clothes in and out of my life, I can't even remember some of them because it was so fast. And I definitely had a time in my life where I went every Tuesday to Forever 21 with my friend Rachel, and I would spend $50 and walk out with a huge bag and wear all that stuff one time, and I'd be like riding my bike and it would just disintegrate. Or sometimes I had to be stapled, my clothes had to be stapled back together in the office. Like, I've been there, right? But I still have all these clothes that I've traveled across the country with all these jobs I've had and all these different times in my life that I've had since the beginning. And I realized, like, those are the things that matter to me. And having that relationship with them, it makes me feel my best too. And so I think we also have a lot of work to reframe what we think about clothing.
And even if you did still go to a Forever 21 or something like that, if you intentionally bought something that you knew that you were going to wear for a lot longer and that it was something that you could continuously put into your wardrobe, I mean, that's a change. That's one step, instead of just buying a whole bunch of stuff. Even if you are buying from them, it's just you're buying less of it and you're wearing it longer. That's one step that you can take to do that.
Absolutely. Like, making things last with care and repair is something that everybody can do, no matter how much money they have, where they live, what size they are. We can all buy less stuff. It doesn't matter what size we wear or how old we are or what shops are near us, right? I think that, like, another reason I use slow fashion instead of sustainable fashion is because I think there's been a lot of gatekeeping in the world of sustainable fashion. There's this fear that, like, one, you have to get all the statistics perfectly right or you'll be discredited. You don't need to do that. You don't need to lay a single statistic on anyone ever. You just need to speak from your heart. And two, I mean, like, honestly, like, the narrative created by sustainable fashion for so long was created by brands who weren't size inclusive, who primarily featured, like, really thin, white, young models. Well, who can see themselves in that, right? And thin, rich, white, young models, right? Like, just the vibe. Or, like, I personally, as you can see, I like a bold print. I don't see a lot of that in the existing sustainable fashion realm, but I do see it happening in slow fashion, where all of these amazing people who are so talented are making things that are art, that matter to them, that are doing it in a better way. And I think, like I said, we're at the beginning of just monumental change that's coming from all of us. It's not coming from anywhere else. It starts with us as individuals.
Yeah. And the stuff that you point out on your Instagram too, so these are just some shots from her Instagram. You got to go there at Clothes Horse Podcast. It's Clothes Horse Podcast on Instagram too, right?
Yes.
And just flip through some of these cute little pictures, and she gives you some facts and some knowledge and some, I mean, it's really educational. Also, Fashion Revolution is another place you can find a lot of really good, and they started because of the Rana Plaza incident.
Right. And they have a lot of really great free resources.
Yeah.
Back in 2020, I took a whole course with them for free, which really helped me get comfortable with a lot of the terminology and the history and the important things that, like, helped shape kind of where I went with Clothes Horse.
Yeah. Well, I know this part is, like, always so uncomfortable for people, so I'm going to ask you this question. I forced you to put some things up here, but I'm like, please brag about yourself and tell us if, any like, media attention you've ever had or anything like that.
Sure. So I was supposed to also, like, put any awards I've had in here, which, like, there are no awards in podcasting, but if someone wants to give me an award, I would love it. I'll put it on a shelf. Prefer, like, a trophy maybe. But I have, like, over the years been getting more and more press. These are just a few pieces. I was really excited to be in Texas Monthly, which apparently people consider the New Yorker of the South. Did you know that? And I've done a lot of stuff with Fast Company recently, The Cut. I mean, if you go to my website, there's a whole bunch of links. And I guess, like, really, I like to be talking to the Texas Monthly reader base about how to buy secondhand gifts for Christmas. pretty epic, like pretty mainstream, place to be having a conversation like that. And the best part was they called me and asked me about, well, they emailed me first, and then we got on the phone, and I was like, hey, listen, like, I'm actually going to be moving away from Texas. And they were like, oh, we don't care. Everyone in our newsroom is a huge fan of Clothes Horse, and we've been like for months, like, how can we do an article about Amanda? And I was like, what? People listen to Clothes Horse?
They do. I can
do.
tell you.
I know.
I listen to Clothes Horse, and I want all of you guys to listen to Clothes Horse, because I'm telling you, she takes a deep dive into every possible subject that you can imagine around sustainable fashion and beyond. I mean, there's the stuff that like is just kind of adjacent to fashion that I thought was really interesting. I learned she interviewed semi-truck like driver on, like, just because thinking about how things get transported, all around the place. I mean, you got to understand all the players involved in the whole entire end-to-end part of the fashion industry. It goes beyond. And the fact that you can buy a $1.99 tank top, and you think about all of those different people involved in it, in every single step, the people who sewed it, the people who made the fabric, the people who made the trims, the people who transported it back and forth. I mean, there are so many hands that touch our clothes, and the fact that it can be that cheap is like astonishing, right? So there's a reason that that's not okay. It's just that if you knew what went into it in the first place.
The math doesn't math.
Yeah, it doesn't math.
And I think that's one of the things I love talking about on Clothes Horse, and I think like that's why we haven't run out of things to talk about, is that making clothes is really complicated, right? It's not just the sewing, right? There's so many steps before that and after that, and people who think that like they're not into fashion or it doesn't matter, it's like, okay, well, do you know anyone who's worked in a store? Do you know anyone who's worked for like UPS?
And do
or
you
the
wear
USPS?
clothes?
Do you wear clothes, right? Do you drink water? Do you eat food? Do you live on this planet? These are all reasons you should care, right? But also just like locally, even though so many of our clothes are made far away from here, the impacts are right here around us. And I think that's something I've been talking about a lot more lately, because for so many people, it's like, well, it's over there. Like if you talk to people about Rana Plaza, they're like, oh, but things are different there, right? It's different over there. It's okay if people get paid 5 cents because it's different there. It's far away. It's a problem I don't need to think about. And we are lucky here in the United States that the primary, scariest, most alarming issues of the fashion industry, we don't see them. I mean, unless you're going to go hang out at a landfill, but I've been trying to, and I keep getting turned down. So, like, but the reality is that all these clothes get exported to the global south, where they're just like rotting away. They're just piling up. There's way more than anyone could ever need. The stuff isn't good enough quality for anyone to want to wear anyway. And we don't see that happening around us, but the microplastics are in the water from polyester, right? And they're in our food supply. On the carbon footprint of all of those flights, I mean, your clothes may have been on more flights than you. I want you to think about that, the way this stuff travels around. All of this stuff we feel right now, and we will continue to feel. And the thing I cannot underscore enough is that who's dealing with the consequences of fast fashion right now and will continue to in the future? It's not the executives at these companies, okay? It is all of us. It is the regular people. And
we drive that change because our money talks.
That's right. Yeah. I always say there are only 2 things that will change how this industry works. One is the law, which there is a lot of stuff in the works right now. And 2 is the fear of losing sales or actually losing sales, because every decision I ever made as a buyer that we ever made in a meeting was based on the fear of losing money.
Right.
And I think that we have that power to withhold our money, to tell them we're going to withhold our money, to demand better. I think you can feel like, how can I as one person make a difference? But if everybody's doing that, it is impactful. It doesn't even need to be everybody. If like 10% of people were like, I'm throwing out my Amazon Prime subscription, for example, Amazon would be freaking out, okay? Right. So that's just one example, but like all of these brands, I mean, we started having to make festival clothing at Nasty Gal because we were losing sales to Revolve over festival. Like that's a different example, right? Like the fear of losing money is enough to make change as well.
Right. Well, speaking of change, one of the things that basically happens when a brand overproduces is you end up with all that excess inventory, right? And all that excess inventory ends up in the landfill or burned in incinerators. And a lot of that excess inventory is actually ending up on the shores of places like Ghana. And they, can't take any more of our disposable clothing. And I'm going to use the word disposable clothing because I think fast fashion, we all talk about fast fashion, but fast isn't necessarily bad. It's actually the disposable part that's bad. So when you can take technology and you can make it fast, but make it less wasteful.
And fit better and last longer.
We can actually, get those trends out quicker because the technology, like you're going to see Saturday at Canvas, where you're using the 3D avatars to do the fittings and you don't have so much waste and you can do those changes much quicker. Those are the kind of things that our industry is going to be able to do to create less waste. And basically, that's the reason that our next guests are going to be here. Now, we're going to switch this up. And we're actually going to bring up 2 more guests. And Amanda, I'm going to step off the stage. And Amanda is going to actually interview our 2 guests. But before we do that, I want to introduce them because first of all, I'm so excited that you're here. But then I'm also so excited that they're here because they joined us the last couple of days for an Eco Parc Summit. And if you look there's a poster on the wall right there, because we had a whole slew of people in this room that are from the industry. Lots of supply chain people came here to kind of figure out how to fix this problem together. And people who are part of the people who make our clothing are trying to figure that out. Brands and retailers are trying to figure that out. We're all trying to figure out what that means. So all that technology, also a circular model, keeping the fibers that are grown locally, turning them into textiles locally, having designers make things out of those fabrics locally, having all of that being sold and then put back into the system and reduced back down to its fiber state locally. That can save all of that air, that going back and forth over boat or air or whatever. All of these things coming together are really what are going to change the planet. But there are some very special people in the room tonight that are really leading the charge to create the first eco park on the planet, and that's who we're going to hear from next. So I'm going to introduce them. The first gentleman that is going to be up here is, well, they're both coming up together, but the first one I'm going to introduce is the visionary behind the Eco Park, who is Bill McGrath, and he is the former Chief Supply Chain Officer for PVH, the SVP of Sourcing at Walmart, the EVP of Victoria's Secret, the CSO of Intimates at L Brands, and he's committed to improving the apparel industry's overall profitability through consumer responsive supply chains and to improve our environmental and social impact. And he came up with this vision of this eco park and has been preaching from the mountains and going around and kind of sharing his vision with the industry. And finally, the first steps have been made here at Fabric over the last couple of days, where everybody came, got together, and talked about it. So he's going to share a little bit about that and kind of what steps were made. And then joining him is Christian Berkey, and Christian has spent over a decade working at the intersection of domestic manufacturing, sustainable innovation, and impact investing in the apparel industry. His start in fashion came as the founder of the sustainable luxury brand Laszlo, for which he was recognized as a leading global innovator by Osaka. Christian is a co-founder and board vice chair of the Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center in Detroit, and the co-founder of Nimbly, a knitting supply chain startup. He's the founder of Because Capital, a new strategy and investment firm set up to build a vertically integrated apparel portfolio, and he advises companies on innovation and the increasing importance of data-driven, globally connected supply chains. He's an advisor to Variant 3D, Catla, and Everywhere, and a former strategic advisor on domestic manufacturing and innovation at the Apparel Impact Institute. He's also a founding board member of the, I don't even know how to say it, Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance, and a graduate of Princeton University, and the co-founder of Vanderway, okay, a luxury menswear brand that he designs with his sister Catherine. You are a busy man. Oh my goodness. Like, I thought I was busy. So these 2 incredible humans are going to come up And Amanda is going to introduce or interview them so we can kind of hear what the results were of this summit, since not everybody in the audience could actually be there. But before we bring them up, I just want to thank you so much for flying all the way out here, sharing everything with us, but most importantly for being the most amazing human that you are, sharing all of this information and putting so much work into your podcast and into educating the world on, you know, everything that you know, and taking the time to really investigate. You do such a good job of getting actual facts and making sure that everything you put out there is accurate and everything, and it's so important. And just on behalf of the planet, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Bill and Christian, if you'd like to come up.
Do you have another microphone for them?
I'm going to hand the microphone to the two of you if you guys can share it between you.
I get my own. You two are sharing. I'm going to stand up for a little bit.
Do you care where we sit?
No, I don't care. I'm going to probably be walking around like a weirdo because of my ankle, so.
Actually, you know what? Before we start, I want to show a couple pictures of this. I'm sorry, can I steal that from you? Okay, I'm so sorry. I forgot I was going to show. This is the Eco Park vision. And then here are a few pictures from this past couple of days where everybody got together. So there's Bill kind of explaining the Eco Park to everybody. We ended up getting Congressman Stanton came, and Mayor Woods, Tempe Mayor Woods came, and they kind of addressed the crowd too, as well as the importance of, you know, having public and private partnerships to be able to pull this off, because this is going to be a combination of government, private industry, public, I mean, everything coming together. And I forgot I threw in a few more pictures here that I thought were pretty cool. So everybody worked really hard. This group came together and spent, I mean, all day, both days, kind of really thinking about all of this. So I just wanted to make sure you guys kind of saw, you know, what that looked like. All right. Oops, hold on. I'm going to put that back up. There you go. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Would you gentlemen like to sit down? I will say I got to hang out yesterday for day 2 of the Eco Fashion Parc Summit, and it was really cool. I got really excited being in the room, and everybody involved was just like so passionate and so smart, and just seeing all that happen made me realize like we can change this. Like, humans are so smart. We can do it, you know? Sometimes it feels really overwhelming, but it's like thanks to projects like this, and also just Fabric as a whole as an organization, that like change is happening. So, okay, I was here yesterday, and like I said, you all, like every brain cell was in action while I was in this room. It was incredible. I could hear like the electricity. Tell us a little bit about the Eco Park and what you've been talking about this week.
Mic's on. Yep. So Bill McCraith, the brand one, right? All the dark side that she was talking about.
Hey, I'm part of it too. I get it.
That's me. Should have a hat of shame on at this point. So the Eco Park, right? This actually was a piece of work. Chief Supply Chain Officer, PVH, we own Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, our big global brands, sell in 123 countries around the world, create 1.5 million units every 24 hours, passing through our systems. And as I head into retirement, I'm now retired, by the way, as I head into retirement, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm working for the second dirtiest industry on the planet, and that it's only going to continue to get worse as global sales are projected to grow. From today, we sell roughly $2.1 trillion of apparel throughout the world. That will be projected to grow post 2050 to over $6 trillion of apparel sales. So if you think we have a waste issue today, you ain't seen nothing yet, unless we fix it, right? And there's really 3 elements to fixing, and if you follow the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and their philosophy, not just in textiles, but just in general, it's reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And if I can reduce the amount that I make or buy, right, I can reuse, fix, repair, reuse, resell the product that I make. That's great. I extend the life of the product. Or recycle, right? And recycle for me is breaking it down, reinserting it, creating new fashion, and so you create this loop that no longer has anything go to landfill. Nothing goes to landfill, it all goes round and round. The Eco Park is this concept of, the first thing I'd say, offshore manufacturing, in my opinion, is great. I spent my whole life doing it. I lived in China for 10 years, 1990 to 2000, building greenfield site, manufacturing, standing it up in China, and then all over the world. I'm a big fan of global manufacturing, amazing facilities. There are terrible stories like Rana Plaza. 1,134 women were killed when that building collapsed. It just so happened the biggest company that was in there, the biggest brand that was in there, had one of the most profitable years the year after that, right? So no consumer cared. If you think the consumer cares, no consumer cared, and that was all over the news, and they were aware, and yet their business boomed after that. Well, what this is all about is to say, okay, we have an air issue, right? We have got companies that you will know like Shein and Temu, who virtually air, I think, 2/3 of all packages that are flown into the US are either for Shein or Temu, right? 2 packages. They circumvent duty. There's no duty to be paid on those packages because it's sent directly to you. And each of you have an $800 free allowance of imports into the US every single day. So when you order from Shein, it's coming straight from their facilities, no duty to be paid. They bypass the checks. But air is a terrible thing. When you air a product, it is about 50 times more damaging carbon footprint-wise than you sending it by sea, and it's 70 times worse because it's high air carbon. It is just devastating the world right now. And if you look at the amount of carbon air freight produces, as you said, I think it's now as big as the 8th largest country in the world is just the carbon created by airing goods out there. So what we started to come together and talk about, and what the Eco Park is really a component of what is a larger vision that incorporates 2 other elements to it. And that is really to say, why do we air goods, right? Why do we have to air goods as opposed to just make them all offshore and let them come in slowly? Well, part of it is because you've got fashion trends that move incredibly fast. And if you make them offshore, by the time they arrive, nobody's buying them. In the apparel business, just as a rough rule of thumb, 25% of the product that is ordered at the time the purchase order is written, it's already waste. We over-order by roughly 25%. That drives these massive discounts that go on and liquidation of product out there. So we have this huge over-purchasing thing that actually drives you individually to over-purchase. Think of the number of times you've walked into a store and probably seen a product that in any other life you would have walked past it and completely disregarded it, but it's now marked down to such a level. How on earth can you possibly walk past it? In fact, so I'm an advisor to a company called Future Proof Fashion that is really if this was my thought, they're the ones who are really driving the hard work of kind of making and pulling all this stuff together that's out there. They ran a campaign in February called in January called Fashion Fast January, and the whole push was nobody buy anything. Everybody just do not buy anything in January because that's when companies drive the big sales. And that's when you buy the stuff that you really shouldn't be buying because you wouldn't have bought it if it was for full price out there. And there's a rough rule of thumb that discounted product is least worn to landfill. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, one of you'll see I did a couple of videos on LinkedIn of, sounds terrible, I took clothes out of my wife's wardrobe. What I pulled from her wardrobe was every item that still had a hang tag on it, still had a price tag on it, okay? I'll do it to all of you, right? Because you all have them, right? And I went through and I hung them up on the wall and I did a video of it, walked through it. common denominator of every single one of those items that still had the hand tag on was they had a big red line through the first price and a massive markdown price, and she had never worn them. And some of them were over 12 years old, and they were hanging in the wardrobe. Now, that sounds terrible, but I would encourage you all to go and have a look at your own wardrobe. And you may have, I'm someone who just removes hand tags quickly, and I did one for myself. There's 2 videos, one on myself where I am actually wearing some of this stuff. Some of it was over 20 years old, and I had worn it once in 20 years. Anyway, the whole idea of this is to say we need a solution. We need the ability to react quickly to consumers in the US or onshore without the air freight or without the need to over-purchase. So only make the stuff that is trending right now and only make the amount that is necessary. And you cannot do that from overseas unless you use air. That is just a no-no. And as you rightly say, specifically coming out of Europe, really driven by the French, quite frankly, there is a lot of legislation that is coming through that is just stamping down on that. In fact, the French just imposed some fairly heavy tariffs on people that are now doing this over there. So the whole idea of this is, let's start to bring back into the US manufacturing capability that doesn't do a basic white shirt. That can stay offshore, right? That can stay out there because that's relatively predictable. But when it's fashion that's trending fast, that we need to react very quickly, that we can actually do it locally, avoid the air freight, only make the exact amount that we need so we no longer have a discount, but equally we no longer lose sales that a lot of brands lose, huge amounts of sales because they can't react fast enough. So that is the first element of the park. The second element of the park is e-com returns and store damages are huge. And because there's no real capability to repair that stuff at scale, a lot of it just gets trashed. It just gets, Amazon has been hit with this in a lot of countries where they literally will just send that stuff straight to landfill. And the other thing that these parks are capable of doing is receiving that stuff, repackaging it, replacing a button, fixing a seam that may have been damaged, but get it back out and back into the marketplace. That's the second part. And so we start to not waste the product that we're making. And the third element of it that creates in another big project that I work on is collecting back used apparel, sorting it into 3 elements. That's stuff that can be resold in the US, so it's still good enough quality, can be resold into the US. Product that can be resold into a secondary market. So I think most people will be aware of the impact we're having in the deserts in Chile with second-hand clothes and waste that's appearing there. It's because we just send all the other stuff, all the junk there, as well as Ghana is getting devastated. It's just a disaster in Ghana if you go there. In many countries around the world, the whole idea is collect, sort, that can be sold in the US, that can be sold in these other markets, because there is an extended life for them, and we should always extend the life. But also to identify the stuff that can never be fixed, never be repaired, never be resold. And that stuff is then immediately packaged up and sent to this other initiative that I'm working on, which is to stand up the world's first largest mass regeneration zone in West Africa that would then feed into brand new apparel. And so again, if you can create that full circularity, actually, fast fashion isn't a bad thing. It creates jobs, keeps people employed, keeps money flowing through the system. You take away the negative of fast fashion by regenerating and recycling. And so that is what this whole piece of work has been about. It's complicated. The US, making goods in the US is expensive. Getting a buyer's head around paying more for it, paying more than $1.99 for a T-shirt. That's a hard thing for them to understand. Except, what if you had to pay more for it, but you got exactly what you wanted, exactly when you wanted it, and you never lost the sale, and you never had an excess item in there? It actually becomes far more profitable for the retailers than simply buying cheap stuff offshore and keeping your fingers crossed that you got it right. And since we have been making togos back in the Roman days, no one has ever bought exactly what the customer has been prepared to buy at full price. We've never hit it. We've either too much or too little, and we have huge losses as a consequence of it. So that was what the work was over the last few days. It was incredibly exciting. The energy was high. My expectations, believe it or not, were quite low. But I'm coming off the back of a 2-day high right now, so.
Just want to add, I think, 2 points to that. One is that, I mean, the business model in this industry can be roughly boiled down to buy 10 t-shirts, sell 3 of them at full price, sell 4 at a discount of an average of 40% off, and then throw away or burn about 3 of them. And the problem with that is that the 3 that are sold at full price have to cover the profit of everything else. And what we're talking about with this Eco Park is addressing a part of that, which is saying if we don't make the other 3, because we have a supply chain that can respond quickly, we can invest in better materials and better wages, and hopefully there's actually a 4th t-shirt in there that could have been sold at full price if we had the capacity to respond to data quickly.
I think that's a really good point, that as a buyer, I would sit down and look at the total cost of producing an order, and I would ask myself, how many units of this do I have to sell at full price to break even? And as my career progressed, we were just selling more and more of those units on sale or writing them off at the end. And then who knows where they went, right? Like in the early part of my career, we could donate it because it wasn't that much. And then over time, no thrift store wanted 1,000, this is a particularly nightmare scenario, 1,000 straw fedoras. It was actually 9,000. But anyway, that was early in my career.
But I mean, on that note, buyers at large companies, I don't know what your metrics were, but you know, I've talked to buyers where if they sell 70% of what they make, discounted or full price, they get a check mark. That's success.
Yeah, you're going to get a raise. You're like brilliant. Yeah, 70%.
And so that comes with a set of incentives that are much more around what's the cheapest, lowest cost per unit that I can get instead of what's the overall profitability. And one of the things that we've talked about is it's not just building an eco park, which is a key piece of being able to deliver on this model, but it's shifting the incentives around what you get rewarded for, and looking at programmatic profitability instead of the per unit price is a huge piece of that. And Bill just mentioned a point that I think is worth making again, which is there's a lot of data that shows that you can pay a lot more for a good if you know you're going to sell it at full price than if you think you might sell it at some point in the next 9 months. And it's really hard to get that through a model where IMU, or the initial markup, which is based on essentially the lowest price you can get, is your metric. But one of the things that we're really pushing, and Bill has done a lot of modeling around, is what you pay is a lot less important than when you sell it and how long you hold it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously, I think everybody in this room is super excited about this idea. Like, it's a gazillion years overdue. What would you say is the biggest obstacle to this? I know. It's like a scroll and it like rolls across the room. What would you say is the biggest obstacle that is preventing that from already being a reality?
Yeah, so I would say I am, or I would say I was, right? So there's a great term out there. It's called the tragedy of the horizon, right? And if you think about it, you think about big business today. Big businesses don't get rewarded. A CEO is rewarded for what did I do this quarter? What did I do next quarter? What did I deliver by the end of the year to my shareholders? That's the horizon they work on. This type of work, and the work I've done through my whole career, which is effectively building supply chains all around the world, typically is on a 3-year horizon. There is no metric, no KPI, no reward system that I ever had that rewarded me for stuff 3 years in the future. And so we don't, to your point, there are no metrics, there's no KPI, there's no incentive for you as a buyer to say, I want you to support me paying more stuff because in 3 years from now, paying more for stuff because in 3 years from now, it will all make sense. But I need you to support it in the meantime. You would say, off you go. My job is lowest price. I've got to hammer these suppliers. I've got to get that cost down. And in that world, these things are very difficult to build because it is a 3-year piece of work. I think there's another part to it, and this is where I have I'll say openly, I think we're in an extinction event right now. I think we're at an inflection point where, look, I'm retired, I'm older than most people in the room. I went through an extinction event 30 years ago where 35 years ago, pretty much everything was made in the US, right? Where I live in Scotland. I flew in from Edinburgh for this event, and that's where I grew up. I ran the biggest facilities in the UK just before I moved to China. Everything was made in the UK. It was made right there. I got an order and I delivered it within a week, right? That was my turnaround time then. And someone came to me and said, could you go to China because goods are cheaper there, and can you build first world factories in China? And that's what I did. So many companies refused to believe that China could ever make anything that would ever sell in the UK. In fact, for my first 5 years in China, people just laughed at me and said, you're stupid. No one is ever going to buy stuff that's made in China. It's cheap, it's rubbish, and that's not what UK people do. And some of the biggest companies that had been around for 120 years very quickly started to go under because China became the place, Asia became the place to make goods, but they never had the vision. They work in what I call Horizon 1, which is delivering, making money this year. My life is to live in Horizon 3, which is over the horizon, and try to figure out what is it that I don't know that I should know, and how do I beat my competitors to it, and that's why I went to China. We're in one of those moments just now, and it's what's unfortunate about it is like it or not, right? And I don't want to sound like this is heresy, that I'm actually a fan of Shein, right? Not for the product that they make, right? But for some of the ways they operate is incredibly insightful. And look, I worked for Walmart, and one of the things I was taught at Walmart was they have a term called steal shamelessly. And what that basically, the story that goes behind it is, in every model, regardless of how good or bad you think it is, there is learnings for you to have. And so if you hear the word Shein and immediately just dismiss them as they're just horrible, cheap, shouldn't be doing it, then what you miss are the little nuggets of stuff that they are doing that will change the world, right? And there are some CEOs just very recently in the last few months lost their jobs of big companies because they ignored what Shein was doing, right? They actually have one of the best sell-throughs in this industry out there. So don't dismiss them. But what you see is new players coming in who are completely unburdened by the legacy of how it's worked for 30 years effectively, that can create a whole new model. You go to any big business today and you say to a CEO, we need to completely change the model. It's no longer about first cost, it's about profitability. It's no longer about making everything offshore. It's a combination of offshore, nearshore, and back in the US. And we need a new tool set. We need to reprogram the buyers. We need to reprogram the planners. We need a whole new supply system. And even if they agree and get their head wrapped around the financial modeling of that, what overwhelms them is, I've got 40,000 people. Go to Walmart, I've got 1.5 million people that I have to reprogram, rechange from a system that it's all they've ever known. If you are under the age of 46 years old, you don't have to put your hands up. Who's old? Who's over 40? I'm over 46, right? So I'm one of those. So, but effectively, if you are under the age of 46 years old, you've lived in a world where it's always been made overseas somewhere, right? You've worked in a model of always chasing low cost, always big orders placed out there. And now I've got to reteach people. So I actually think we're in a part of an extinction event where a lot of the people that you currently shop at and buy at, in 10 years from now, they may not have disappeared, but they will no longer be the big players. They will have gone. And what you will see is a whole new bunch of players that have come in that are more sustainable. They are doing these new models. They are only making what the consumer wants. They are recycling their product, because I think The change that's required is just too big for big companies to go through. The average life, by the way, I used this the other day, the average life of a Fortune 500 company back in 1950 was 60 years. The average life of a Fortune 500 company today is less than 18 years, right? Half of the companies on the Fortune 500 in 2020, so it's 24, in 2020, half of them no longer exist, right? They've gone. Wow. The world is shifting so fast. Companies just can't change that fast. And that's why 99%, go back 100 years ago, 99% of those companies back then who were amazing and great, and they were the greatest ones out there, they don't exist. They've gone. They've evaporated. They can't change.
And I think it's just important to remind ourselves how complicated and large this industry is. And what we're talking about is a wholesale shift that is probably as fundamental to how the industry operates as going to China was 35 years ago. And that was a decade of work and trillions of dollars of investment and a lot of expensive lessons learned. And one of the reasons why we came together as a group over the past few days is to see if we can do this in a slightly smoother and more effective way. And so, continue.
Yeah, I would just say that. I would say that one thing that we recognize is that no individual company, whether it be a supplier or whether it be a retailer, regardless of how large they are and how hard they try, no single company will change the model. It won't happen. They will get slaughtered. What will change it is if we come together under the umbrella of pre-competitive work to tackle the damage that we're doing to the environment, the damage that we're doing on the social justice side throughout our supply chains. If we come together, we can change this, and we could actually get through it faster than we did when we did it back in the 90s. We can move there faster, but it will only happen if we collaborate. And what was great yesterday was you had a set of people in the room that under any other day, any other circumstance would be in a knife fight with each other trying to win business. But the last 2 days, they were prepared to sit down and talk about, okay, but we collectively need to make this a better industry. And that was just amazing to watch.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and I know you would agree with this. I think we're at a really big turning point. And when I say we, I mean the fashion industry, because brands out there kind of have two options right now, right? They can try to compete with Shein with the current infrastructure that they have, which means they're going to fail.
And they won't.
And right. I mean, I read, I don't know how many of you like to relax by reading some earnings reports, but that's like a pretty regular thing for me. And I mean, to tell you, brands are going away. They're going to go away in the next 5 to 10 years. I believe Express declared bankruptcy this week. I'm seeing it happening on the horizon with some other brands. And I wonder why they're opting to try to compete with Shein or Temu, knowing that they can't, rather than like actually probably saving their business and having like a brand win by saying, we're gonna start creating and supporting technology like this fashion park or any number of other things, by saying like we're going to sign on to support legislation that will change the way this industry works. I mean, honestly, like how many people here would give money to a brand who was doing that kind of stuff, right? They would get your money right away. It's hard. I mean, I look at this and I say like, okay, why? Everything you're saying is making sense. Like they can't see the big picture. How do we get them to see the big picture and say like, hey, it's scary and hard, but we're going to do this because we won't be around in a few years if we don't?
So I just want to clarify a couple of things because I am a little bit of a cynic and a skeptic. Can you be both? Anyway.
Me too, it's
I'm
fine.
both. I am absolutely a cynic and a skeptic that the consumer actually does care. So I sit a little bit on the other side of a fence on some of this stuff. I had CR teams who would come and show me all these results about surveys they had done about consumers absolutely care, they're going to change the industry, fast fashion is going to go away, it's just they're not going to put up with it. And it was like, well, what were the questions that you asked them? Well, we asked if they support world peace. And it's like, did anybody say they didn't support world peace?
Yeah, what's wrong with those
people?
people?
What they said? So Future Proof Fashion, interestingly enough, did a survey. using TikTok. They did a survey, but they didn't ask questions, not deliberately. They simply went open-ended and said, tell me all the reasons that you buy clothing. What makes you buy fashion and clothing? And then they used AI ChatGPT technology to scrub through all these responses that came in. Only 6% of the people ever mentioned the word sustainability as being a reason to purchase. It was fashion, it was price, it was brand, was in there. Those were the drivers when it was open-ended, as opposed to when you ask the question, do you support sustainability? 90% of them would say, yes, of course you would, and I would as well. Look, I even challenge all of us in a room like this, because I wake up and think about this stuff now every day, partly because I'm guilty, right? I was one of the people that created the model that's so bad, and that's the reason that I work on all of this pro bono, right? I do all of this for nothing, simply in my retirement to give back and hopefully make an industry better as I exit it out there. But I attended an event recently where everyone's talking about the consumer's going to change it, they're going to do that. And the question to everyone in the room, because they all thought about this stuff, was, then tell me where your clothes came from. Where did you buy them? Did the farmer get paid properly? Was it aired? Do you know if what you were wearing was aired or it came by sea, right? And it's not about making anybody feel guilty. I'm not attempting to do that. Because my answer is, I don't know. I don't know on the stuff that I'm wearing. And I think about this stuff every day. How the heck are we supposed to expect a consumer, as they go out and reach out, excited about the fashion item or the product that they're about to see, to care about it in that moment, and even if they care, to access the data and the knowledge to find out about that. Now, there is stuff underway that will actually allow everyone to do that, and that's why I am such a huge fan of legislation. I think our industry failed to take the opportunity to self-regulate itself, and that is game over. Right? For me, we need to legislate, we need to educate, and then we need to litigate, right? And actually hold people's feet to the fire on this stuff. And I think that's what moves the dial. I just want to, I'll hand it to you, Christian. I do think there's a real opportunity to start for brands to actually take this opportunity to separate themselves. Now, I want to give a good example of this away. Because I think right now there is a tendency that everybody is looking at Shein. They are looking at Temu. And by the way, it's not just Shein and Temu. You've got a whole cider. You've got a whole host of people behind them that are coming up fast as well. So it's not just those two. There's just a proliferation of those players that are appearing on the market, but it's all chasing fast, right? What I call, it's not fast fashion, it's disposable fashion, right? And they intend it to be, they wouldn't argue with you, they intend it to be disposable fashion. There's a real opportunity, rather than chase it, to separate yourself away from it and actually create, and that is a growth opportunity in my mind. And I want to give a real example. I was at Victoria's Secret, and when I was there was this whole debate going on about Walmart's into intimates, into bras, you know, that they're starting to produce them and sell them at lower and lower prices, and half the merchants were saying, we've got to push our prices down because we need to compete with Walmart because they're capturing this whole market. Les Wexner, who was the owner of the Limited, right, he stepped in and said, no. Actually, I want you to do the opposite. I want you to increase the price. I want better product, better quality, better foam pads, more time taken to get the fit right, right? Body by Victoria, one of our top things. That was a 3-year piece of work for us to get that exactly where it needed to be. And it exploded into the market, and it was 3 to 4 times more expensive than any competitor that was out there. And we just took the market. We owned the market at that time. So it wasn't about chasing a pie of stuff that was there. It was about exploding the pie and creating this whole new market that's out there. And so I do think there's a real opportunity for people to step up into that space and declare it. Be declarative about what you're offering that customer. I think there's an appetite for it.
I agree.
So on the question of, I got into this industry by starting a small brand in Detroit, hiring people coming out of prison to use organic cotton and make t-shirts and sweatshirts. I got into it really with a faith that consumers were going to drive change. I since have developed some of the same cynicism or skepticism that Bill has, at the same time that I think every single one of us that cares needs to be very conscientious consumers. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only lever that we can pull. And legislation is one, but profitability is another. And this, I think one of the reasons brands aren't doing this, and maybe it's because we're in an extinction event, but the average profitability of a publicly traded apparel brand is 3%. The world global leader is Zara or Inditex at 13%. I think Ralph Lauren's at 7%, and some of the big ones are at negative profitability. So we have a lot of brands who are operating with very thin margins, and that place of scarcity and urgency is really hard to drive significant innovation from. They're trying to survive, they're trying to not lose their jobs, and so I think you see a lot of companies who probably have some idea that this change is coming, but don't have the support from the investors. The leadership is scared about losing their jobs. If there were a few people to take the lead, I think there would be a lot that would follow. But the question is, how do you find the ones to make that first step? And I think part of what we had in the room were the suppliers that are willing to say, hey, we think if we build this, they will come. Because in the past, we've done that.
Yeah. And I would also say, without giving names, there are some pretty big retailers that have weighed in on this and said, if you can get the suppliers to go with you, we're with you as well on this new model. Because one of the things that this model does do, and we've run the financial modeling a number of different ways, is, on a relatively small profit margin that a lot of retailers are making today, this has a 200 basis point increase in profitability to actually bring it onshore and be more sustainable than continue the current model that's effectively just failing. It's just, and again, that's where the extinction event comes in for me. No one will win by trying to simply tweak the current model to try and fix it. The current model is done. It's over. It's a new model that is necessary, and that's when extinction events happen. I had dinner last Thursday. I had dinner with a guy called Paul Pullman, who he wrote Net Positive. He's kind of a guru in this space, and I was telling him just how hard it is to kind of move the dial on this stuff and get people excited about it. It's like corralling cats, right? It's really difficult to do, and you've kind of got half the people excited half the time, but you've never got all the people excited all of the time. It's a hard thing. He said, don't try to get all of the retailers and brands or all of the suppliers energized and excited. If you can get 5% to move on this, it's the 5% that change the model. It's the 95% that will either die or follow. And so I felt we had a great 5% this week. So hopefully we'll make headway on it.
That's amazing. How are we doing on time?
I don't want to, though. I want to keep this conversation going.
I know, yeah. Well, so what's next? Like, what's going to happen next?
So, I do want to be clear. There is progress being made. We're making great progress in Ghana. In Ghana, we've got Sir Tony Blair, the Tony Blair Institute, a group of other people that are really starting to throw their weight behind that. We're working with the Ghanaian government on it, and that. So we feel good about this regeneration zone and the ability to create this whole new model that we have new supply chains founded on consuming our own waste. That's the way we would think of it. Brand new product founded on the consumption of its own waste. So we feel good about that model. Obviously, getting the onshore Eco Park helps that. But I would say the tempo is up. I was in Miami 3 weeks ago, with a number of the big brands in the US, and we were talking about this model, getting them excited about it. I'm back in Las Vegas on August 20th for a VIP session where I'm presenting it again to a collection of brands and retailers. But I think the next step is to corral the 5%, and start to build it. That's what's next for us. And You know, I feel this year is going to either be a good year or it's going to be a very, very bad year, right? We're either going to make progress or we're just going to sit back and we're going to watch the casualties fall, and then the new ones will come in and create a whole new world for us. That's where we are.
One of the things that we talked a lot about the last couple of days was just the magnitude of the problem and being comfortable with that uncertainty and the reality that we will not get it 100% right, but continuing to break it down into smaller and smaller steps to move forward. And I think that's great advice in any business or systems change you're working on. But I think for our work, it's really saying, okay, we're pretty aligned on where we want to get to. We've got an amazing set of companies from all over the world working on this. What are the next steps that we can bite off and move forward so that we're not paralyzed by the scope of what we're trying to do and can continue to get that 5% moving forward?
I guess I would say my last question is, what advice would you give to, whether it's current executives in the fashion industry or perhaps these future executives in the fashion industry, what piece of advice would you give them when it comes to thinking about the future?
The word I have been coming back to over and over again, I guess it's 2 words, but courageous leadership is really what's lacking in this industry.
Yeah.
And so looking in the mirror every day and saying, you know, what can I do that's bold and courageous? And I think every one of us should ask that question, but the leaders at the top of this industry have a real reckoning around a lack of courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would say that the future is for the bold would be the kind of the catchphrase for me. But I again, look, I was part of this, so I do want to be, I understand the challenge that it is to sit in a company at the C-level and you know, because you said, how would you ask them to think differently about the future? I'd ask them to think about the future, right?
Yeah, very short-sighted generally.
And it's that tragedy of the horizon. Most people are focused on, will I hit this year's numbers? Because if I don't, and one of the big negatives that we're seeing across the whole industry just now is there's a lot of shedding of staff going on as people look to tighten up their costs as the environment gets harder. And unfortunately, the groups that are getting impacted the most are the groups that think about the future, are getting taken out, and the CR teams, the corporate responsibility teams, the very teams who should be working on making a better future, we're seeing those get eradicated in many organizations just now. And it's all because a lot of companies are shifting to survival mode. And again, I feel for them, right? Because I don't think any executive woke up this morning and said, I'm going to do a bad job and I want to damage the planet. Like that when I get to work, that's my 2 objectives. They want to do a good job. They want to help the planet. But unfortunately, if they don't hit the numbers, they'll get taken out and replaced by someone else who may not care about those things. And, you know, and so it's this balance of, and what we've got to convince them, and, you know, it's our job to figure out how to convince them that by putting this model in place that does improve the planet, and does improve the social environment, it also improves your bottom line. And it makes you more successful than you can ever be and under your current model. That's the big challenge.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, I mean, change is always happening, and really right now what we're seeing is this industry sort of reaping the consequences of a model that doesn't work, right? So like, we talked about you touched on the returns earlier. I mean, average more than about a third of the clothes that people buy get returned, and often no one ever wears them again, right? There's this egregious overproduction. The returns and the overproduction, all this stuff happens because, you know, no one's taking the time to get it right. There's not funding to get it right. As technical design teams, we see them going away and we can't afford fit models and all that stuff. And I really, you know, there are times where I'm sympathetic to this industry, maybe because I've spent so much time in it, where it's kind of dug itself into this hole that it can't get out of without a radical change. We have to slow down the returns, right? We have to make stuff that people keep. Yeah.
Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't worry about the big brands. Maybe you just let them go extinct.
I mean,
and you focus more on the new players who are not burdened by legacy. One thing I would tell you is, I would love to be 25 again. So I was roughly 25, 30 when I went to China to build all these new supply chains. And it was the most exciting, exhilarating thing that I ever had a chance to do in my career. And since then, it's always been changing, but it's more tweak it, move it, shift it, find the next low-cost environment, but effectively repeat the model.
Yeah.
We are in a moment in the textile and apparel industry, and not just that industry, but I mean, you've got it, semiconductors getting built in Arizona, right? There's a reason for that, right? There is no more exciting time to enter the world of supply chains and textiles and fashion. It's a game changer. And if you get in the driving seat of that change and you're part of that change, you will be a future leader, right? Because you're in early, you will create it, you'll create the new model for the future. I get so excited, but then I realize I'm 63 and I'm tired and my bones are sore. But I look at the young people and I just say, grab it. It's just so exciting. Be fearless, be bold, be radical, be a maverick. Just go do it. It's just so amazing what we can create out there.
Spoken like a true cynic.
Yeah, no, but I do get passionate. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, thank you. You know what? On those lines, I want to mention this because the people who are doing that are the apparel entrepreneurs that, you don't have to get out of the way, you can still see it, that are making unique products, using technology to make those unique products. And those are the people that we're helping here at Fabric. And they are going to be showcasing their collections on Saturday. You're going to be able to see those products, but also scan the products where you can see how those products were made. And so technology is really the driving force behind, showing the policy that's coming down the line and being able to incorporate that into your collection as a brand. That is powerful. The big brands aren't even doing that. So when these small brands can make unique artwork and they can actually charge a little bit more for it because they've made it domestically and it's valuable and it's something that people are going to hold on to longer because of that, and then they can show the transparency of it, that's really the model. And so the brands that are coming through here can take the reins and they can lead us into the new future and be exactly what you're talking about.
And always remember, every big brand was once a small brand, right? So if you have a great brand, you could be the next H&M, right? They were all small. They were all little local at the time. And they nailed an idea and they grew it. And it's a chance for a new beginning. I think we're going to see the big trees cleared, and we're going to see a whole bunch of new players that are more caring about the planet and are more profitable. All the current ones are struggling on profitability.
Well, I want to thank both of you guys for staying an extra day to do this. Bill, I think it's just really admirable, that you could have just gone off into the sunset in your retirement and that you took the time and you still completely spend probably more time than you did during your time working, trying to fix the planet. So on behalf of the planet, again, I would like to thank you for, for helping save us. Again, thank you, Amanda, for coming all this way and letting us pick your brain, and for being a host tonight as well, too. So let's give her one more round of applause. And thank you guys for staying with us and for coming tonight. And I hope you keep coming to all of these and, keep participating. And those of you who are apparel entrepreneurs, keep driving forward. You are the change. You are the new sustainable fashion. Angela. I know, it's been a long week. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. We are so humbled that you guys came here to actually do this good work. So thank you for choosing Fabric. Thank you.